All right, today we're jumping into a couple of huge theological concepts, divine sovereignty and divine glory. We're going to unpack what these ideas really mean, and maybe more importantly, why they matter, pulling everything we discuss straight from the source material. So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by defining what God's absolute rule even is, and see it play out in the story of a very powerful king. Then, we'll get into the weight of God's glory and the tragic story of what happens when it's gone. Finally, we're going to tie all these big ideas together and see how they connect to our own lives.
Okay, first up, God's absolute rule. Let's get right into it. What are we really talking about when we throw around a word like sovereignty? Well, the source material gives us this incredibly simple but powerful definition. God rules and God overrules. What that means is, He's not just some passive observer. He's actively governing everything, from the massive sweep of history to the tiniest details. And, this is key, the source stresses that absolutely nothing happens unless He either causes it or permits it. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This quote from the source shows how this one idea can cause two totally opposite reactions. On one hand, for believers, it's this huge source of comfort, right? Knowing that a good God is in control, even when things are tough. But on the other hand, for some people, it can feel, well, threatening, almost like it takes away our free will. So to make sure this doesn't just stay some abstract philosophical idea, the text gives us a fantastic story about a powerful king who had to get a master class in sovereignty, the hard way. The source lays out this incredible contrast for us. You've got King Nebuchadnezzar, probably the most powerful man on the planet at the time. He has earthly authority, a temporary kingdom. He demands people worship him. Then you have God. His authority is over the entire universe, his kingdom is eternal, and he doesn't demand worship, he is simply worthy of it.
So here's how the story plays out. It all starts with a dream that hints at a power way bigger than the king. In response, what does he do? He doubles down on his own power and builds this giant golden statue. He makes a decree, you bow to my image or you burn. But it all leads to a moment of divine delivery that just completely shatters his reality.
And this is the moment it all comes to a head. This is the king at his absolute peak of pride. He's facing three guys who are defying him, and he throws down this challenge. He's basically asking, you and what army? He's pitting his power directly against theirs. It's a question that just hangs in the air, demanding an answer.
And the answer he gets isn't a speech, it's a spectacle. The source points to this incredible moment. The king leans in, looks into this superheated furnace he created, and sees not 3 burned bodies, but 4 figures just walking around totally unharmed. God didn't just answer the challenge, he completely overruled the king's power and even the laws of physics. And the result is stunning. The same king who arrogantly asked, "What God can deliver you?" is now giving one of the best definitions of sovereignty you'll find anywhere. He goes from defiance to declaration, recognizing a power that is absolute and unstoppable. Talk about learning a lesson.
Okay, let's pivot to our second big idea, the weight of glory. Now, when you hear the word glory, you probably think of light or brightness, right? Well, the source text wants us to think about it in a much deeper, more substantial way.
So here's the crucial point. God's glory isn't just a bright light, it's got substance. The source explains that the original Hebrew word actually carries the idea of weight or heaviness. Think of it as the sheer gravity of God's presence, the tangible, heavy reality of who He is, put on display for all to see. And just like with sovereignty, the source gives us a powerful story to bring this idea to life. But this story isn't about glory's presence. It's about its tragic absence. The entire heartbreak of the story is captured in this one, single, haunting name. Ichabod. So, what in the world does that mean?
It literally means the glory has departed. The source tells this devastating story of a dying mother who names her newborn son Ichabod right after hearing that the Ark of the Covenant, the physical symbol of God's weighty presence, had been captured in battle. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was a spiritual catastrophe.
And this story points to a huge warning sign in the source material, the danger of having the form of religion without the fire of God's actual presence. You see this pattern again and again. Israel had the ark, the symbol, but they lacked obedience. Samson had the reputation for strength long after the presence that gave him that strength was gone. These churches had a good name, they had wealth, but inside they were empty. They had all the stuff, but the glory itself was gone.
Okay, now we get to the part where these ideas can feel a little tricky to hold together. It's the big question, right? If God is completely in control, what about our responsibility? The source dives right into this apparent conflict.
Now, the common misconception is to think, hey, if God is sovereign, then my choices don't really matter. I'm off the hook. But the source completely flips that argument on its head. It says that God's sovereignty doesn't cancel our responsibility. It's the very foundation for it. We are responsible precisely because He is the sovereign creator who has the right to set the rules.
And to explain this, the text talks about different footings that God sovereignly set up. For angels, Adam, and the nation of Israel, their standing was conditional. It depended on their obedience. But for believers, who the source calls the elect, God established an unconditional footing. Their relationship isn't secured by what they do, but by what Christ has done. In every single case, though, it's God who sovereignly sets the terms of our responsibility to Him.
So let's bring this all home. We've talked about these huge cosmic ideas. What's the takeaway? How does any of this apply to just living our lives?
Well, the source argues that when you really get God's sovereignty and glory, it leads to one simple, profound standard for everything. His glory becomes your compass, your filter for every single choice. Whether it's a huge life decision or what you eat for lunch, the guiding question is always, does this reflect the weight and worth of the one who rules it all?
And this final quote we're looking at really just ties a bow on the whole thing. It's saying that the thing we should be most proud of, our ultimate glory, isn't being smart or strong or rich. It's one thing, actually knowing God for who He truly is.
And that leads us to the final, crucial distinction the source leaves us with. There's a huge difference between knowing a bunch of facts about God and truly, personally knowing Him. The text suggests that understanding His sovereignty and His glory is what helps us bridge that gap. So, we'll leave you with that to think about. What does that difference really look like in a life lived for His glory?